So I don't know what the weather's like where you guys are, but out here it's gloomy, it's overcast, it's rainy. We have a little bit of thunder and lightning going on. So I feel like today is really a perfect day to be listening to Big Big Train. And we've got some new Big Big Train, so let's dive into it. The Likes of Us by Big Big Train. So Big Big Train, I feel at this point doesn't need too much of an introduction. They're a UK progressive rock band. Got their start fairly early on in the whole progressive rock landscape in terms of like the second or third wave of progressive rock. I mean, From the River to the Sea was released in 1992. So, you know, we're looking at a legacy of about 30 years or so. And since then, we've had over 15 albums. I think that this is their 16th one because I'm not going to necessarily consider Ingenious Devices as a full-on LP. I consider that one more as like an EP, an extended play, because that's what it is. It's a bunch of reworked, previously released things. But anyway, we are on the 16th or 17th, depending on how you want to look at it, studio album from them. And for me, it wasn't really until the 2012 album of the English Electric, that was then followed up by English Electric Part 2 in 2013, that really put them on the map for me. I know for a lot of people, it's the Underfell Yard that came out in 2009 that really did solidify them in the progressive rock scene. And I would agree, like, that's the first one that really made them feel like Big Big Train. And since then, they've kind of had a little bit of a spotty release schedule. You know, like either the albums are really good or they're kind of forgettable. Folklore, I really loved. I really loved the Grand Tour, but Grimm's Pound and The Second Brightest Star, Common Ground, and Welcome to the Planet, I wasn't all that excited for. And we've also had a little bit of a lineup change. As we all know, David Lungden passed away. The band has found a successor in Alberto Bravin on lead vocals, guitars, and keyboards. And yeah, I so much of what I loved about Big Big Train really was David's haunting singing styles. You know, he wasn't just a Peter Gabriel copycat, even though he was leaning a little bit on his influences in that sense. But there was this presence about him that I was really concerned about that lack of. And the lineup, other than that, is the same, but also flushed out. I know on Welcome to the Planet, it was fairly condensed, but now we've got a little bit more kind of helping us out in here in terms of Claire Lindsay on vocals and violins and Oscar Holdolf, I think is how you pronounce his last name, on keyboards and vocals. But everybody else is, as we've seen before. We have Nick DiVergilo on vocals, percussions, and drums. He has more of a prominent role in the vocal works, and I wonder if this was because some of these songs were being written without that lead singer in mind, and so I do notice Nick being present a lot more on this record in terms of the vocal works. Same with Rickard Solblum on guitars, mainly on the keyboards and vocals. I don't hear Rickard as often on this record, which was a little bit of a shame because that was one of the glowing points that I had for Welcome to the Planet, was how prominent Rickard sounded on there, especially within his keyboards, bringing that Beardfish presence onto a Big Big Train outfit. I really, really appreciated. And he has such a distinct voice that I was really excited to hear more of that. But he's just kind of lost within the harmonies. Like, he does a very good job of providing these 3 to 4 part harmonies that I really enjoy, but it's kind of hoping for a little bit more from him, if I'm being honest. And then, of course, we've got Greg Sponston. I always trip over Greg's name, and I'm so sorry, Greg. He, in my mind, is kind of the guiding star for a lot of Big Big Train. You know, he's the main bass player as well as a little bit on the acoustic guitars and mellotrons on this one. And then rounding out the fold, we have Dave Foster on here. So yeah, there was a lot riding on this record just because of the absence of David on here. And, you know, there was a lot of uncertainties. You know, was this going to be a next chapter? Were they going to try to, you know, what was this going to sound like? And in my mind, The Likes of Us is both one of the best records that I've heard from Big Big Train, as well as, unfortunately, one of the more forgettable ones. So it's one of those weird kind of almost feels like a double album, like we have two separate albums on our hands, and half of which is really good and I really love it, and the other half is just kind of like, the Grimm's Pound, the Second Brightest Star, kind of more Big Big Train stuff. So I want to talk first about the things that I love about this album, and it really is the first three tracks. We have Light Left in the Day, Oblivion, and Beneath the Masts. These three tracks are some of the strongest Big Big Train tracks that I've heard probably since the Grand Tour. In terms of being memorable and having that sticking power, having that drive, having that power, especially that transition from the Light Left in the Day and going into Oblivion. That transition, so seamless. It reminds me of some of the transitions that we had within the early ages of progressive rock with bands like Vandergraaf Generator, where, you would have on God Bluff, like, two tracks off of the first side, and it really felt like a singular track. Like, it didn't feel like there were two tracks off of that first side. And that's what it's feeling here. Light Left in the Day does a great job of really planting the flag and saying, hey, we are here to honor a fallen friend. We are here to honor our friends that are no longer with us and carry on that legacy, to build it forward and to continue the work that they left behind. And I really love the drive of this track. I love how powerful it is. I love how immediate it is as well. And when we come into Oblivion, that call out of Oblivion, that big crescendo that we have at the beginning, it provides such a great groundwork for everybody to play. And everybody is playing at top notch on this one. The guitars, the keyboards, the synths, the mellotron, even the vocals wrapped around all of that. It provides such a brilliant playground for everybody to work within. Nobody's outshining anybody, and everybody is elevating everybody else up. And this really comes to a head within the longest track, the big epic of this, which is Beneath the Masts. And again, this is part of the reason why I come to Big Big Train. It's the storytelling aspect. It's their weaving of a tale. I love the ebb and flow of this track. I wish that Big Big Train would kind of put themselves down and do that big 20-minute track that they did back at the Underfell Yard and really stretch their legs and get that 20-minute track out there, rather than kind of flirting with us in these 12, 15, and 17-minute ones. Not to say that Beneath the Masts needs to be any longer, because I think it does a really good job of just planting its flag where it needs to be and stopping the track before it gets too long. But man, that big crescendo just before the summarization of the track, before the reprise of the major theme, is so heart-wrenching and so big in its sound that I can't help but love it. So these three tracks really are the bright and shining star of this whole album. It's just a shame that after that, we have 5 more tracks that I don't really feel like they warrant the runtime that they're taking up on this album. Skates On is a fine little smaller track, and this would be a really good track between two bigger epics, and I think that's what it was trying to do. But the second longest song of Miramar, it feels like I'm trying to name Miramar, Thor's hammer on this one. At over 10 minutes long, I don't feel as if this song really justifies its length. I love a good epic song. I love a good long song, but it needs to justify its presence. It needs to have something there to justify its length. And I just feel as if this track never really comes to it. There's a lot of build-ups, but I don't feel the payoffs. There's a lot of climbings, but there's no plateaus. It's just kind of meandering the landscape a little bit that I'm not all that much of a fan of. And Love is the Light is another fine, smaller, quieter track. And the last two tracks, they do their best to try to carry on this ebb and flow, this energy. But yeah, Bookmarks and Last 11, I feel as if they kind of ran out of steam and they didn't know how else to capture that oomph that they had with the first 3 tracks, and it just kind of peters out by the end here. At 64 minutes, this is one of the shorter Big Big Train albums that we've gotten in a while, and I applaud them for that. I do like the shorter runtime, but I would have probably even cut out even more. Put it into the 50-minute mark, heck, put it in the 45-minute mark. We already had a couple albums this year that were flirting around the 45-minute mark, and I was just fine with that. If they had shaved off, say, like Take From Skates On and The Last 11, really rework those into, instead of having 5 tracks, maybe cut it down to 3, heck, even cut it down to 2, and have this album be around 45 minutes, we would have had something really, really special on our hands. That being said, this album was still a very good treat, and it was one of the more enjoyable moments that I've had from Big Big Train in quite a while. I would definitely put this one above Welcome to the Planet and Common Ground. So if you liked both of those records, I think you're really going to love this one. But if you're more like me and, you know, the only albums that you've really come back to within the Big Big Train archive is, you know, the Underfell, the Full Electric, the Grand Tour, and Folklore. You know, those are the only ones that I really come back to. It's going to be a little bit of a mixed grab bag, you know, so that's kind of where I'm at for this one. The first 3 tracks, super strong, absolutely love it. Past that, you can kind of do without. That's just my own thoughts. So in the end, what I'll say about this album is The Likes of Us by Big Big Train is one that I would absolutely download. Honestly, those first 3 tracks are enough to check this one out. I really would give this one a spin, just as I mentioned, for those first 3 tracks. After that, you can kind of take or leave it, in my personal opinion. I know there's going to be people that are like, oh no, the rest of the album is totally needed, and it really contextualizes it. And if you find good things after that, absolutely go for it. I love that for you. Just for me, it left me wanting more, and not necessarily in a good way. But that's what I've got for The Likes of Us by Big Big Train. What did you guys think about this album? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Whatever you thought, please let me know by commenting down below. And yeah, that's all I've got for you guys. So thank you all so much for watching. As always, you guys are definitely the best. And until next time, notes out.